We're live. All right, so this Maamer was said by the Rabbi on Shabbos Parshat Naso, which is the 9th day of Sivan, in the year 1983. And it's based on Birchat Kohanim, which we spent a little time on already this week. And this is an actual Maamer. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer. The Maamer begins by quoting the pasuk from the Parsha, which is found in the 6th chapter, the 22nd verse. Hashem speaks to Moshe saying, Da'aber al Aaron ve'alban of Leimer, speak to Aaron and his sons saying, Koisavarchu as Bnei Yisrael. This is how you should bless the Jewish people. Omar lahem, say to them. Yivarechecha, which is the first stanza of the blessing, Yoer, and finally Yisa. And then we conclude the three verses, the three psukim that speak about blessing. The Samues Shmi al Bnei Yisrael, I will place my name upon the Jewish people, and I will bless them. So the Rebbe notes, Hine, Kachoshev Kan, Inyanim. We have mentioned here 5 different things. There's 5 different segments here within the framework of these psukim. Gimel HaBrachas, there's the 3 blessings, Yevarechecha, Yor, and Yisa. V'acharkach, and after mentioning the 3 blessings, Meisef, Oid, Beis Brachas. Here we have 2 more blessings. The Samuel Shmi al Bnei Yisrael, that's a blessing. I'll place my name upon the Jewish people. That is a blessing. And then finally, Va'ani avarachem, I will bless them, is also a blessing. The Bebeis Yonim Achreinim, in the last 2 details which are mentioned, moving it's understood, Shahabracha hinailis beyeser, that the blessing is extremely lofty. In other words, not only Yivarechecha, not only will Hashem bless you and keep you, not only will Hashem cause His face to shine and radiate, and v'yichuneko, you have chen, you have a sense of charisma, and not only that, but furthermore, we have the 3rd blessing of Yisa Hashem, that Hashem turns toward you, v'yasim l'chashalim. But after saying all these 3 things, we add v'samwes shmi. Samwes shmi, says the Rebbe, this refers to Shem HaMiyuchad. That refers to this special name of Hashem. There are many names of Hashem, but then there's what's called the Shem HaMiyuchad. So since it says Shmi, my name, it's not a name that you're called by. That's my name, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. That's the name that I go by. That's my name. That's like somebody has stamps with his personal, these are personal effects. So the idea of a somewhere Shmi, not that Shmo Shala Kadosh Baruch Hu, as if we're discussing something that's happening, but it's like Shlishi HaMedaber, that we're speaking about, there's a narration. So and so will happen, such and such will take place. No, we're talking somewhere Shmi. Hashem says, I'll place my name, which as the Gemara says is Shem HaMiyuchad, Va'ani avarachem, and then it says Va'ani avarachem. So there's 2 things. There's Shmi, and then there's an addition of Va'ani. Bechinas ayin. The Rebbe notes that Va'ani, the Alter Rebbe explains in L'Kutei Torah, and it's also explained in Maamer of the Tzemach Tzedek and Rebbe Marash, that the word Va'ani and I is also a euphemism or a frame for the concept of ayin. Ayin literally means nothingness. Like we say, the world is created yesh me ayin, ex nihilo, something from nothing. That's a very lofty level of divinity, the level of ayin, the level that transcends any kind of description, any kind of specifics, insofar as description of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is concerned. So we talk about the level of ayin. This is Va'ani Avarchem, means the level of ayin. As he notes, that it's brought down in Chassidus, and it's also brought down in earlier writings of Kabbalah, Meiri Eidus, and other Sfarim, that it says that ayin is ani is oisius ayin. That the word ani, I, is also the same Hebrew letters that make up the word ayin. All right. So far, we have within Birchas Kohen, and we noted that there's not just 3 blessings, but in fact there are 5 different segments of blessing, and bracketed onto the 3 things, the 3 verses, Al Yevarechecha, Yor, Yisa, is 2 even loftier kinds of blessings. The idea of Shmi, Shem HaMiyuchad, and the idea of the concept of Avani, idea of Ayim. Okay, the Maamer goes on now. The Rebbe says, V'chein, move on. It's also understood that this is more than just an ordinary blessing, mitchilas hakosuf. Even though the beginning of the pasuk, which introduces the whole notion of the blessings, does not speak specifically about a blessing, but even the beginning it gets introduced with the idea of koisav varachu. So you shall bless him. This is how you shall bless them. Which just has understood in the Gemara as in a number of different ways. Kaisav Baruch Hu means that you have to do it in the Hebrew. Kaisav Baruch Hu means that it has to be done audibly. Kaisav Baruch Hu means also that it has to be done in a standing position. But here the Rebbe notes that the word on a mystical level, the idea of Kaisav Baruch Hu, that Baruch Hu is Eisi is Bekisrei. It's the same Hebrew letters that make up the word with his crown. Now we know that within the gestalt of human emotion, we have Esespheres, we have 10 different levels. There are 3 intellectual levels, 3 emotional levels, 3 functional levels. Then there's Malchus, Chabad, Chagas, and Nehi, or Nehim. And then we have what precedes the active order of human activity, the active order of human activity of people contemplating or thinking or analyzing or grasping or getting engaged and involved emotionally or actually starting to do something about it. Before all this, there's the concept of a keser, the concept of the crown. In the Kabbalah stickman, we have the head representing Chacham bin Adas, the right hand representing Chesed, the left hand representing Gvura, and then we have the idea of the crown on top. What is the crown? That means the ultimate motivator, the mover and shaker of everything.
Ratzon.
Ratzon. Very good. Ratzon is desire. As we say, if there's a will, there's a way. Usually you also have relatives also, but that's a joke. And on a serious level, the idea of Ratzon is the ultimate dominating force. So there's a will, there's a way. As long as there's a Ratzon, there's a strong Ratzon, a Ratzon Az, then amazing things could happen. Now, very interestingly, we have the ultimate mover is not Ratzon. What causes Ratzon? What causes desire? Something called Tainug. Tainug means, literally translates as pleasure. It could be inner satisfaction. It could be an inner sense of self-worth. It could be the reality that a person feels absolutely complacent or at perfect peace. A sublime happiness, which everybody wants. That's Tainug. Everybody wants to be in that position. So Keser, that is made up of Ratzon and Tainug. The ultimate architect, the mover and shaker of all of human activity is ultimately the concept of Ratzon, the concept of the Keser. So it says, Koi Sevarachu, that Sevarachu, as the Eisius is the same Hebrew letter of the word Bekisrei. Now we're not playing Scrabble today, but Al Pi Kabbalah, when you analyze a Hebrew word, and you're able to note that the same Hebrew letters also can spell a different word, that's not like a little game. A shpilichel with words, you play around, you Scrabble it this way, or you play Scrabble that way. The idea is that there's this idea is encoded. This is basically being able to understand the multiple messages that is conveyed to us within a word of Torah. One of the ways of being able to decipher the message is to be able to know how those Hebrew letters could be arranged, how they could spell something else. So this is the idea of Bekisrei, and that means Shahabracha, that the blessing is extremely lofty, that it comes from the level of Hashem's crown, so to speak. And even though it's explained in many places, amongst them a whole slew of places in Lakota Torah, and also in the Maamer of the later Rabbi, that's explained over there, sheyesh maila b'tefila al bracha, that there is a superlative, a supreme virtue with regard to prayer, vis-a-vis the concept of a blessing. What's the virtue? Why is prayer more profound and powerful? Shahabracha mamshicha rak mimkoir v'sheresh hadavar. A blessing can actualize that which already exists. It may exist on a very lofty level. It may exist in a very, very high and sublime kind of reality. One that cannot be actualized, one that can't be experienced in a regular basis. That's true. However, it has to work with something. The bracha, which means hamshacha, which means drawing forth, which means actualizing, you can only actualize potential. So a person could say that I have this potential, I never realized or actualized the potential, and then an extraordinary set of circumstances unfolded, and as a result, the potential was actualized. It's mamash bracha. It's unbelievable. You have to have something to work with. If you don't have potential, you don't have the possibility of being able to actualize a bracha.
You mean Kelim?
No, I don't mean Kalim. Kalim is how in very, very square language, how you download into the Kalim. You need a system. We're not talking about the system. I'm saying
that too.
You need a system too. But besides a system, you need to have something to actualize. if you have potential, if in theory this reality is part of your existence, but maybe it's in a very distant orbit, it's far away from your consciousness, so it has to be actualized, it has to be brought down into your reality. That's a bracha. Bracha means hamshacha. So the bracha always works with what's already there. Masha'en kain, but when we talk about tefillah eiser ratzon chadash. Prayer can make a new will, a new desire. As the famous expression goes, how do we daven? We say, Yehi ratzon. Yehi ratzon, may it be your will. So a person can say, I know you have this will. I know deep down you want to do the right thing. Let me help you access your deepest realm of ratzon, the deepest recesses of your desire. I know you want to do the right thing. And that's what we say, you can speak to a child today, use positive language. I know you want to do the right thing. I know you want to do a good thing. Come on, we can do this. And a gifted teacher or a gifted mentor is able to bring forth the ratzon that's really there. What if there's no ratzon? What if there really is no desire? What if on Hashem's part, if you will, this doesn't exist? Not even on a theoretical level. What do you do then? Then you pray. Then you pray. Then brachas aren't going to work. Yehi ratzon, may there be a will. The bracha, we said, is bekisrei. Kaisav varuchu bekisrei, in the crown. The crown is will. The crown is that ultimately this will bring somebody into a sublime state of inner peace and therefore happiness. But what if that doesn't even exist? Then there's prayer. So in that case, prayer seems loftier than a blessing. So how could we say that Birchas Kohanim is the highest of the high, the greatest of the great, that which comes from Bekisrei, and that which is Ani, and that which is Ayin, and that which is Shmi, that which comes from, so to speak, the realm of Hashem's crown, which is the deepest rungs, if you will, of divine super consciousness, and the idea of the ayin, that it comes from the source of everything, or that it comes from Shmi, Shem HaMiyuchad, my essential name. In fact, prayer seems greater. So the Rebbe says, it's true that there's a virtue within prayer that eclipses and is greater than the concept of a bracha, but that's generally speaking about all brachas. But it's known that when it comes to Birchas Kohanim is yet greater.
Because it's Hashem's presence.
Well, we'll soon see why. But that's just a statement. The first question was, how could it be? Second is, there's something about the concept of Birchas Kohanim that sets it apart from all of the other brachas. It's not another bracha. It's not just within the framework of bracha that it means hamshacha, and therefore, because bracha is to actualize, bracha is to draw forth, bracha is to make a part of our reality, so therefore, the concept of tefillah is supreme. So no, not this bracha. As explained in a number of different... What's your question?
Even though it comes from a third party, the Kohen, to you? To us?
The bracha doesn't come from a third party. The bracha comes from Hashem.
No,
It comes through the Kohen.
just a kind of...
The Kohen, yes, even though all brachas ultimately have to come, you could say, through somebody, through something. There's a mechanism through which the bracha comes. But the nature of Birchas Kohanim is that Hashem says that the Kohen is gifted with the special opportunity to become a vehicle, to become a bridge, to become the envelope through which these blessings will be delivered. Ani avarachim. That's the emphasis. It's not the Kohen's bracha, it's Hashem's bracha. So this idea of Birchas Kohanim is explained in Drush Admor Maharash, in the Maamer of the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Rebbe, which is miyusad on Sefer HaMitzvos Latzamach Tzedek, from his father, Shabirchas Kohanim, Hunaila Yesem Mishara Brachas. That the Rebbe notes there that the blessings of the Kohanim are loftier and greater, more profound, more intense, and ultimately even more meaningful than prayer, because of the nature of how a special bracha it is. Yeshba gam mailos hatfila. Whatever virtue there is within prayer, what's the virtue of prayer? That we could create something that wasn't there before? Birchas Kohanim can do that too. A regular bracha can only actualize potential. Birchas Kohanim can create potential and then actualize it. More so than all the other brachas. But yesh bagam mailos hatfila, it has the virtue of tefillah. Ad shehi yechayla lifail inyan chadash. So much so that it can bring about a new reality that did not exist at all before. All right, that's the first opening chapter of the Maamer. And actually, now that we've got here, this is the meaning of Kaisav Baruch Hu. That Kaisav Baruch Hu, we said, is the concept of B'kisrei, with his crown, sham shochas habracha de birchas koyanim, himisfidas hakeser, that the blessings that are actualized by the kohen do not come from the lower levels of that which already exists, meaning after keser. But as we explained before, keser is the prime mover and shaker. Keser is the source of everything. So this bracha comes from keser. This bracha comes from the ratzon. This bracha goes back to the concept of tainuk, to the ultimate arbiter of everything, that which motivates and moves everything. So even if there's no ratzon, even if there's no will, even if for whatever reason the person doesn't find any joy, any satisfaction, doesn't find any happiness in that, the concept of birchas kohanim can bring you back to that well, to that source, and bring forth from there. Because that's the opening volley or the introduction to birchas kohanim. From there comes the other three brachas. From the concept of keser, as we explained, comes the idea of yevarechecha yar yiso. V'gam beis habrachas, and all this includes also the two other blessings, which mentioned earlier are bracketed on the idea of v'samu, that Hashem says, I place my name. And finally, the idea of ani avarechim, that I will bless. V'hine yadua. Now it is known that there's a diuk in Likutei Torah. In Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe analyzes the concept of birchas kohanim as they appear in the Torah carefully. And the Alter Rebbe, treating the text charitably as we should, notes that it seems that something is out of place, and therefore that's indicative that there's a deeper message being conveyed to us. What do we seem to note? Mahu bir seder habrachas. Alter Rebbe talks about the order of the blessings, because it's not only the blessings themselves that are important; it's the order in which they unfold. The l'cha'era, superficially, when we do it at a casual glance, Hem shaloi al haseder. They do not seem to be in order. They're not in order. They're not in the right order as they should be. Because things are coming from, if you will, a loftier place, and therefore it has to make its way all the way down into the concrete reality. So just like things you have to first have a vision, an idea, then you have to talk about it or communicate it until you can act upon it. Nobody says maisa, dibur, and then machshava. That doesn't make any sense. First you have machshava, first you have thought, then you have dibur, then you have communication, and then you have maisa. When it comes to birchas kohanim, it seems that the order is reversed. Alter Rebbe explains shahas seder hu milmata l'mayla, that the order of birchas kohanim is not as you would think that it's coming from a loftier place, from a more profound place, into a more superficial reality. That first is the machshava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and after machshava, then the, so to speak, the dibur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then finally that's followed by maisa. No, it's not how birchas kohanim work. Rather, birchas kohanim are in order from, we start on the lowest rung and we move our way upward. The betchilas habracha, the opening volley of blessing of the priestly benediction is yevarechecha, Hashem should bless you, and the idea of yishmerecha, that Hashem should keep you or guard you or watch you. Shehi bracha shebeteva. This is a nature, with a blessing, within the framework of nature. This deals with and is ensconced within the order of choreographed evolution. Evolution means that things evolve. One thing begets the next thing. Machshava, a good thought, a vision, that begets contemplation and careful planning. Careful planning ultimately leads you to the point of communication, in which you're able to share the idea and maybe inspire others. And then you can follow that up with action. Let's make this happen. So V'yevarechecha and Yishmerecha are speaking about a very actual, literal reality. That, as Rashi says, that the concept of Yevarechecha and Yishmerecha, that's talking about Yevarechecha b'mammon. So we're getting blessed, so to speak, financially. We're talking about residuals over here. And the Yishmerecha is min hamazikim, from those who would come to disturb you, those who would come to try to take away what you have. That's what the concept is. So therefore, we have this idea of Yevarechecha, which starts in the lower level. And only after that, the Yishmerecha min hamazikim. Ulamailam is what's loftier than this, the idea of Yoir Avaya Panav Elecha, V'yichuneka. Yoir Avaya Panav is a metaphor. And the euphemism is that Hashem's face will radiate and shine. And finally, v'yichoneka, the concept of chen, shiam shachas habracha milmaila. That is yet a loftier and a higher kind of blessing. We're not talking about things in the concrete, in the literal level, but we're talking about things on a loftier level. We're talking about the concept of Hashem's face, so to speak, radiating, Hashem's countenance radiating. It means to be in a higher state of God consciousness. It means to experience a greater closeness to Hashem, not just to have residuals and wealth and affluence that's unmolested or not disturbed by other people. And finally, we have the bracha. V'adsha bracha hi ba'ifin shel chen, the concept of charisma. V'yichoneka loshen chen, that Hashem gives you grace, He gives you charisma. She'am shacha shel amayla memidida v'agbala. That comes from a loftier place, from a higher place. Why? Because what does it mean somebody has charisma? If you engage, you're engaging with people, so you're engaging with them. That's why you're able to forge a relationship. That's why you're able to have a connection. If a person is extremely gifted and extremely communicable and extremely able to understand others and is able to relate to them, fine. So then there's the idea of you being able to relate. Chen doesn't mean that I'm making a conscious effort to relate. Chen means a person who naturally somehow relates to others, which without even trying. People who are really charismatic don't try to be charismatic. In fact, it doesn't work to try to be charismatic. You can't try and be connecting to people. Either you connect, some people connect, and some people don't. It's a personality thing. So where does that come from? That's not within the framework of my efforts, that comes from a loftier place. In other words, the idea of chen is a hamshacha shalamayla mimedida v'agbala. In the parlance of Chassidus, and we're talking about the language of Jewish mysticism, we have this notion of us reaching out to Hashem, of us making an effort, and us creating an awakening from below called Isarusa de Lasata, and that engenders a response from on high. The loftiest of all is we have this notion of God turning His face to us. The notion of Hashem's countenance turned to us is loftier even than the concept of chen. That means that the presence of Hashem resonates or radiates within us, within our being, as we are. So we see that the brachas are backwards, from a lower place to a higher place. What does that mean? Why would that be the case? If a bracha is hamshacha, the concept of bracha means to actualize. So first you actualize things on a loftier plane until they can become experienced in the concrete or in the flesh. So what does this tell you? Before we do any other analysis, before we discover anything else, the first thing it tells you is that berachas kayanim is not like every other bracha. It's a different kind of hamshacha. It's an actualization process that does not require ingredients or building blocks in order to create this in our realm. A regular bracha has to work with something. Either you get it, it's there, or you don't. Question, can I be mamshchet? Can I draw it forth? Here we're saying that the concept of the bracha, as it's discussed in Torah, is starting off on the ground, working your way backwards. So we're not simple actualization. It's not simple drawing forth or bringing from a loftier or more distant realm into something which is closer to the atmosphere, but rather there's something different going on here. Okay, so very briefly, because we're really running out of time, the explanation of this is the Hini Amr Razal, sages say in the Gemara in Brachas. Amru Malachi Ashadas Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the ministering angel said before God, the Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the universe, Ksiv b'seirascha, it is written in your Torah, Asher lo yisefanim v'lo yikach sheichad. You do not take any kind of bribery. Nobody can buy you off. Lo yisefanim, Hashem shows no favoritism. He will not take bribery. The Malachim said, V'haloi ata noisepanim liYisrael. You do show favoritism to the Jewish people. In fact, not only you show favoritism, it's your blessing to them. That it says, Yisa Hashem panav elecha. Here he says Hashem shows no favoritism, and a moment later you say Yisa, that Hashem does show favoritism to the Jewish people. Amar lahem. So in this proverbial discussion between God and the ministering angels, HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers, V'chilo yasefanim liYisrael. Should I not then show favoritism to the Jewish people? I don't know. Why should you show favoritism? So he says, I'll tell you why. Shekasafti lehem b'teira. I wrote to them in Torah, V'achalta, you will eat, V'savata, you'll be sated, U'v'irachta, esavai lekecha. And after you eat, and after you're sated, then you bless Hashem your God. And then it finishes off, Ani Hashem lekecha. I am the Lord your God. Behem, so what did I say? I said eat, be sated, and only after you achieve satiation, then uverachta, then you bless. Behem edaktik and alatzmam, but they are very exacting and demanding of themselves. Ad kezayis, ad kebetza, depending on what we're reading, depending on the halachic variables, even a modicum, a serving, a small amount, just an ounce, they're already medaktik, they already do the bracha. Why? I didn't say that. So in other words, the Jewish people are going beyond the call of duty for me. Since they do so, I respond in kind. What does this mean? What does that mean? God says, here's what I don't do. I don't show favoritism. Oh, you show me favoritism, I'll show you back favoritism. That doesn't add up. What does that mean? Because we are exacting and precise with ourselves and have greater demands. That's why this idea of Nesias Panim. Why? What does one have to do with the other? There's a bigger question. If there's a mitzvah to bless, why is there a tonight? Why is there a condition? Why do we have to say, tell you what? In the event that you'll eat a certain amount and you'll reach satiation, then you'll bless, then you'll thank me. I don't know. Last time I checked, if somebody does something for me, I should say thank you. Whether I'm satisfied or not satisfied, whether I achieved my entire intentions or not, I should say thank you when I have the opportunity to benefit from somebody else's gift. If God's beneficence to us is the food He provides, and we should be thanking God for that food, so what's the difference if I reach satiation? What's the difference how much I get? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me food, I should thank Him for the food. Why do we have a condition? I'll only say thank you if I like the gift. If I'm happy with the gift, if it hits the spot, if I'm satisfied, then I'll say thank you. Otherwise, I'm just going to ignore whatever you did. Why do we have this condition? So, bracha, when is there a blessing? Kishiyesh tzviyah, when there's satiation. If you're going to say that the concept of bracha is not shaykh, it's simply not within the realm of possibility unless you reach satiation, the blessing is not for the food itself, the blessing is only on the satiation. Well, that's not really correct technically, because Matzina we find in Torah, Shebracha Rishayna, Ein Shir L'Maichel, that when it comes to thanking Hashem before I eat, and according to many of our sages, this is rooted in a biblical notion, like Rabbi Akiva says, that a person who eats without a bracha, he's Mail Behegdish. You're defiling that which doesn't even belong to you. It really belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's kinetilas reshus, it says. It's like getting permission to be able to enjoy God's blessing. So clearly, our sages understood within the framework of Torah, within the rubric of Torah logic, that a blessing does not require the concept of satiation. So what are you telling me a story? In order to be able to do that, I need satiation. It's not so. Huh?
God tells us in His Torah.
I understand God tells us in His Torah, but the question is, that was the question. Why does He make this condition? Vim came. That's the question. Madua nikva b'Torah. Why in the Torah was it established in that way? There's a shir l'bracha achreina, that in order to make the after blessing, having already eaten, that you don't make this bracha unless you reach satiation. Shulchan Aruch has explained in the Code of Jewish Law that there are actually different levels of bracha achreina, different levels when a person is able to, so to speak, reach this concept of the responsibility of bracha achreina. Shezet tali. Ultimately, the key principle here is im ha'adam sava oilai. Was he satiated or not? That's the key principle. That's the operating, the working theory. So the question is why? The Rebbe explains the hini yadua teres harizal. There's a famous teaching of the Arizal on the pasuk. A person exists as the Arizal. The pasuk, the verse says. Pasuk of Parshas Ekev, that it's right in the same collection of psukim that speaks about the idea of Berchus HaMazon, that not only by bread alone does a person live, ki al kol moitze pi havayav, all the things that, so to speak, come from God's mouth, yichya ha'adam. What does this mean? Explains the Arizal, dahainu moitze pi havayim shebelechem. It doesn't mean there are things which issue from God's mouth, or there's, in other words, the bigger frame of creation, and the lechem is just a detail within creation. No, we say that there's a moitze pi havaya, there is the utterance of God's mouth, or the infusion of divine reality that makes something exist within the bread, that's what you're living from. If you're going to tell me that the bread is wonderful, and I need the bread for survival, because it has within it pi havaya, it has moitze pi havaya, it has the utterance, it has the speech of God, it's invested, God invests in it. In that case, what do I need to eat the bread for? I have Maitzipi Havaya in me. I have even a bigger Maitzipi Havaya. Whatever little neshama, whatever little soul or energy or spirituality is found within bread, there's more that's found within me as a human being. The explanation is, you have a soul, that's true. A lofty soul, a gorgeous, magnificent, beautiful, exquisite soul. But there's something about the spark of holiness that's found in the bread that's even greater than what you have. Why? It comes from a loftier source. And as explained many times, because something comes from a loftier source, the higher it is origin, the greater the fall. Depends where Humpty Dumpty fell from, right? So if it's a higher place, then it shatters in more pieces. Well, because it comes from such a high place, that's why it fell so low. The higher the origin is, the lower the fall, the more powerful the impact of the fall. That's why we seek the Maitzipi Havaya. That's why we seek the spirituality. That's why we seek the spark of holiness that's found within the bread. We seek to actualize or to access the holiness. We seek to access and to bring into our life the sparks of holiness that come from this loftier place. The same thing is also true with regard to clothing, to wardrobe. Same thing in regard also to the concept of shelter. It's all included in lechem. Lechem is one of these big words that includes everything. You say, even in non-Jewish sources, they have this idea of bread. Give me my bread, or I just need my bread. Bread represents sustenance, and sustenance can easily be divided into the things that are necessary for survival, and invariably, depending on which month of the winter it is, but usually you're going to need not only food, but you're also going to need shelter, and you're also going to need wardrobe. You're going to need something to wrap around you, which is klalos tzarchei ha'adam. This represents the general idea of human necessity. Of the needs we have to sustain ourselves, like it explains the Likutei Torah and the famous Hemshech of Maamer of the Rabbi Marash. The halavushim meisifim b'chvei adam. The truth is that clothes they do make the person. People say the clothes make the man. To some degree, it does. It creates an aura. If you look like a schlepper, then people will assume you're a schlepper. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression, and the clothing you're wearing has an enormous contribution in the kind of impression you're going to make. And clothes also change the way we act, the way we feel. There's many statistics done in schools that have uniforms that the children perform better scholastically, academically, because of the clothing that they wear. So when you're wearing a uniform, you behave a certain way. Maamer, like the famous expression we find in Gemara in Shabbos, he called his clothes my honor. Shelter also is a very important part of our human existence, our human ability to function is impacted by the concept of a home. Not only when I'm in a beautiful home, even just owning a home. Maamer, as the Gemara says in Yevamis, which is brought down also in the Tosfos and explained over there, Kol Adam she'ein le bayis eini Adam. You're homeless, you're a half a person. You're not as human. It directly impacts your feeling of humanity, your ability to function as a human. And the idea of Adam doesn't say any gever, doesn't say you're not a dude, you're not a guy. It says any Adam. Adam means the concept of Adam Ela Elyon, in the image of God. Adam Kate said Yeda Adam Kvar Hela Maspik Nitzutza. So the idea then of all of the necessities of a human being is about elevating the sparks. How do you know when you did enough sparks? How do you know when you had enough? Maybe you have to elevate more sparks. The answer is Hashem has a built-in system that tells you enough sparks. Move on to your next activity. What's that? Right, that's the idea of satiation. How much of this gashmias, how much of this material reality do you need? You'll know. When you overeat, you're not elevating the sparks anymore. Then you start to go in the opposite direction. You start to sink into the food, and you become from a human being who's engaging with the physical material world, who's elevating something. Instead, you become a hazard. You become a behemoth. Pig never has enough. He always sticks his snout and he wants some more. And that's the difference. A person has to know, and it's interesting, by the way, that almost all medical practitioners will tell you today that overeating, overindulgence, is probably the single most dangerous thing a person could do. It's exactly what the Gemara says. Don't overeat. The Rambam says you always have to leave a little bit of, a little something empty, some empty space. Hasimun lazeh. When do you know enough? V'savata. If the physical reality is sated, Harei siman, that's a sign, shekvar kibo masbek chayes. In other words, we're looking at everything through a spiritual perspective. Everything from eating to satiation. It's all about a spiritual reality. It's all about elevating the physical world that Hashem gave us. And that's the sign. We have a barometer. When do I get enough sparks? When do I get enough holiness? When I'm sated. That's when I know it's enough. That's when I know it's sufficient. So now, this is the idea of Birchas HaMazon, which comes specifically through satiation. And therefore, the bracha now is to bring forth a higher, far greater level, a more profound level of divine beneficence. I elevate the sparks, and then I have to follow it up with a bracha. And this is the idea of the Jewish people who say, we're not going to wait to elevate until we reach the satiation. They said, even a kezayis, even a kebeya, even the smallest amount. Already a yid says, I have to experience spiritual elevation. Every moment of life has to be sanctified. Not that I'll eat as much as I could and then worry about how do I sanctify this experience. I have to have a continuous sanctification. I eat even a small amount. I reach even a small point of satiation, even a small point, even if I'm not satisfied. But I had what's enough to work with already. I had a kezayis, right away a bracha. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, we're going beyond the call of duty. So he responds to us in like fashion and goes beyond the call of duty. And unfortunately, we're out of time. We cannot complete this Maamer, but I hope you've learned many interesting things. Chaim.
It's not favoritism. It's
Thanks for joining us, everybody.